Hello, online college algebra students. Welcome to our final exam review. In this series of videos, I'm going to work through each problem on the final review worksheet. You can print this from our class in Blackboard and work through these problems with me. In this video, I'm simply going to work problems 1 and 2 for a quick review of complex numbers. Problem number 1, we're supposed to perform the operation on the complex numbers. Notice in number 1, we are squaring a binomial. Anytime you square a binomial, I recommend writing that binomial twice so that you will know to FOIL and not distribute the exponent. When we FOIL here, the product of our first two terms, 5 times 5, gives us 25. The product of our outside terms, 5 times negative 7i, gives us negative 35i. The product of our inside terms, notice that turns out to be the same, minus 35i. And the product of our last terms, negative 7i times negative 7i, gives us plus 49i squared. Now remember, anytime we see that I squared, we replace it with negative 1. So on the next step, I want to combine my two middle terms to get negative 70i. And then notice we have 49 times negative 1, which gives us negative 49. To finish, we simply need to combine our real parts. 25 minus 49 gives us negative 24. And then negative 70i is next. Remember, when you express a complex number, it always has to be in this standard form. The real part has to come first, the imaginary part has to come second, and they have to be separate. Remember, you can check this with your calculator. So if you will turn your calculator on and type your answer, type the problem in as it is originally written, 5 minus 7, and remember the I is located there above the decimal key, close parentheses and square. When we press enter, the calculator, remember, presents it in that standard form. So negative 24 minus 70i is correct. And remember, if you'll take your calculator to the final exam with you, you can check your answers as you go, and that should ease your anxiety just a little bit. Remember, full credit comes from showing your work, so the work still has to be shown, but you can definitely check your work with your calculator. On problem number 2, we are dividing complex numbers. If you'll recall, when we divide complex numbers, ultimately we're just rationalizing the denominator. Remember, I is the same thing as the square root of negative 1, so we have a radical lurking here in the denominator. We want to make the denominator rational. So what we're going to do is multiply the top and the bottom by the complex conjugate of the denominator. So I'm going to keep the same two terms, but change the sign in between. Then we'll carry out the FOIL on the top and the bottom. When we FOIL the top, the product of our first two terms is 6. Outside terms plus 2i, inside terms plus 12i, and last plus 4i squared. When we FOIL the denominator, notice the outside and inside terms are going to cancel because we're dealing with complex conjugates. So we're only going to be left with the product of the first terms and the last terms. Now, in both the numerator and the denominator, we need to replace the I squared with a negative 1, and we've got some like terms to combine up here in the numerator. Executing that gives us 6 plus 14i minus 4. And in the denominator, we have 9 minus negative 1, which is 9 plus 1. Simplifying once again in the top, the real parts, 6 minus 4, give us a 2. We've got a 14i, and then 10 in the denominator. Now, you can look at that and anticipate that it needs to be reduced, but even more importantly, we need to separate the terms so that we can express the answer in standard form. So I'm going to take the first term of the numerator and give it the denominator, and the second term gets the same denominator. Then I can reduce the fractions individually. Let's see, on this second fraction, the common factor there is 2. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 goes into 14 7 times. Notice that's what I did on the first fraction as well. So we end up with 7i over 5. Okay, so you can write the I in the numerator as I've done there, or you can write the I in the middle of your fraction. Just make sure it doesn't sneak down there into the denominator. Now, when you check this one with your calculator, be sure to enclose both the numerator and the denominator in a set of parentheses. That will allow our calculator to evaluate this with the correct order of operations. And remember, when you enter the I, you do second and decimal. The calculator expresses it as 0.2 plus 1.4i. You can convert that back into a fraction in some cases. Okay, try it on your calculator. Your calculator may display 1/5 plus 7/5 I. In this case, my calculator won't do it. I've found some versions will do it, some won't when it has the I. If yours does not happen to do it, here's how you can check it. Notice the calculator told me the answer was 0.2 plus 1.4i. Let's look at the real part, 0.2. We express the real part as 1/5. Notice the decimal form of 1/5 is 0.2. So ours is correct. The imaginary part, the coefficient there is 1.4. We use the fraction 7/5. Let's look at the decimal value of 7/5. It is 1.4. So 0.2 plus 1.4i is equivalent to 1/5 plus 7/5 I, and we have evaluated it correctly. All right, that was a quick review. If you need some more practice, you can look in the review section of your textbook, or you can even pull out your midterm review worksheet for a little bit more drill and practice on evaluating complex numbers. In the next video, we'll work on our quadratic equations.